Every empire believes its currency will last forever. Every generation believes their money is immune to collapse. But history proves the opposite. From ancient Rome's silver coins, to China's first paper money, to the British pound, and even the modern US dollar, every major currency has followed the same predictable pattern. Economists call it the inflation death cycle. It always begins quietly, almost invisibly, and ends in a storm that wipes out savings, destroys nations, and rewrites the global financial map. Today, we're going to break down the 5 stages of this cycle using real historical evidence, real events, and real numbers. And by the end, you will understand why every currency eventually dies and where today's world might be in this 5-step pattern. Stage 1 is stability. This is the phase people romanticize when they talk about the good old days. In this stage, a nation's money is trusted, stable, and often backed by something physical, like gold or silver. Rome's silver denarius started here. For nearly 2 centuries, the Roman government kept its money supply stable, and Roman citizens trusted their coins because they were nearly 95% silver. In Britain, the pound sterling earned its name because 1 pound literally meant a pound of sterling silver. And for most of U.S. history, a single dollar could be exchanged for a fixed amount of gold, 24.75 grains of pure gold in the late 1800s. Stable currency allows stable prices. People can plan long-term. Trade expands. Empires grow. But stability never lasts forever. Stage 2 is expansion. This is when governments discover the most dangerous temptation in economics: printing money. It never starts with greed. It starts with a temporary emergency. The Roman Empire faced rising military costs. The British Empire fought expensive colonial wars. The United States printed money during the Civil War and again during the Great Depression. In each case, leaders said the same thing: this is temporary. We will fix it later. But they never do. Instead, they find printing money is the least painful way to pay for things without raising taxes. In Rome, coins slowly dropped from 95% silver to 85%, then to 70%, then to 10%, until they were almost worthless bronze coated in silver paint. In the early 1900s, Britain abandoned the gold standard to fund World War I. In 1971, the United States permanently removed the dollar from gold because it could no longer afford the fixed exchange rate. Expansion always starts slowly. Prices rise a little. People complain, but life continues. But once a government begins creating money to solve problems, it becomes addicted. The cycle moves to step 3. Stage 3 is loss of trust. This is where citizens begin sensing that something is wrong. Prices no longer stay stable. A loaf of bread costs a little more every year. Rent rises faster than wages. Savings lose value. Governments reassure the public that inflation is under control, but people notice reality changing around them. During the late Roman Empire, food prices doubled multiple times within a single decade. In Weimar Germany, after World War I, inflation increased from 60% per year to 1,000% per year within 4 years. In Argentina, inflation averaged over 100% annually for years, destroying the peso's credibility. Even in the United States, purchasing power has dropped 87% since 1971, according to Federal Reserve data. When people lose trust in their money, they begin taking defensive actions: buying gold, buying land, moving their savings to foreign currencies, or investing in anything that holds value better than cash. Loss of trust marks the point where a currency cannot return to stability without massive economic pain. And at this point, governments always choose the same path: even more money printing. Stage 4 is acceleration. This is when inflation stops being a small rise in prices and becomes a runaway problem. But here is the key: inflation doesn't accelerate because prices go up. Prices go up because governments print money faster than their economy can grow. When the U.S. printed over 40% of all existing dollars during 2020 and 2021, the inevitable result was the highest inflation in 40 years. When Zimbabwe printed $100 trillion notes, inflation hit 89.76%. When Yugoslavia printed money to cover government salaries in the early 1990s, prices doubled every 34 hours. Acceleration also happens silently, without visible printing. In modern economies, digital money creation now happens inside banking systems. When banks issue loans, they create new money. When central banks lower interest rates, money creation accelerates. During Japan's 1990s crisis, the Bank of Japan attempted to stimulate the economy with newly created money for decades. The result was stagnation, deflation, and inflation. Once a currency enters the acceleration phase, people try to spend money faster because they expect prices to rise tomorrow. This creates a feedback loop. The faster money circulates, the faster inflation grows. And eventually, the cycle reaches its final phase. Stage 5 is the death spiral. At this point, the currency collapses. People stop trusting it. Shops refuse to accept it. Citizens demand to be paid in foreign money or in physical goods. Governments often respond by printing even more, hoping to outrun the crisis. But that only accelerates the collapse. History is full of examples of this final stage. Rome's currency collapsed so badly that taxes were collected in food instead of money. Weimar Germany's collapse was so extreme that workers demanded to be paid twice a day because money lost value by evening. In Hungary in 1946, inflation doubled every 15 hours, the worst hyperinflation ever recorded. Prices rose by a factor of 1 trillion. Venezuela's bolivar lost 99.999% of its value after 2016, and citizens resorted to bartering food and using U.S. dollars instead. When a currency dies, an economy doesn't simply slow down, it breaks. Contracts fail, savings disappear, trade freezes, and governments are forced to create a new currency, often backed by something stronger or controlled by foreign institutions. So here's the real question. Why does every currency follow the same 5 steps? The answer is simple and uncomfortable. Governments always promise fiscal responsibility, but human nature always intervenes. When leaders face a choice between raising taxes or printing money, they choose printing. When voters demand benefits the government cannot afford, politicians borrow or print to satisfy them. And when debt becomes too big to repay, inflation becomes the silent tax that nobody votes for, but everyone pays. The International Monetary Fund has documented 52 major currency collapses in the last century. Research from the University of California found that the average lifespan of a fiat currency is just 35 years. And in all documented cases, the collapse followed the same pattern: stability, expansion, loss of trust, acceleration, and death. So where is the world today in this cycle? The answer depends on the country. Japan is deep in stage 3, with debt worth over 260% of GDP. Argentina and Turkey are in stage 4, with inflation above 50% and rising. Lebanon and Venezuela are already in stage 5, with currencies effectively abandoned by their citizens. And the United States? Most economists agree that the U.S. is at stage 3, moving toward stage 4. Since 1971, the dollar has lost over 87% of its purchasing power. Since 2008, the money supply has tripled. And between 2020 and 2021, the U.S. created more money than in the previous 40 years combined. History shows that once a currency enters stage 3, it rarely returns to stability without major structural change. Now, this doesn't mean the U.S. dollar will collapse tomorrow. The dollar is still the world's reserve currency. It still backs global trade. More than 60% of international transactions use dollars. But history also shows that reserve currencies are not immortal. The Spanish real ruled the world for 300 years. The Dutch guilder dominated global trade before collapsing in the 1700s. British pound was the world reserve currency until after World War II. Every one of them followed the same pattern. The difference today is that the cycle is happening globally. Almost every major central bank is printing more money than ever in history. The European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan, the Bank of England, and the Federal Reserve have all expanded their balance sheets to record levels. According to the Bank for International Settlements, global debt is now over $307 trillion, higher than any year in human history. The inflation death cycle is not a theory. It is a pattern repeated for thousands of years. The only question is how fast each nation moves through the 5 stages. Some take centuries like Rome. Some collapse in a decade like Weimar Germany. Some fall almost overnight like Venezuela. But no currency escapes the cycle forever. If you found this video valuable, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us create more deep dive documentaries on the hidden history of money, finance, and global power. Thank you for watching Retro Finance Files. Stay curious, stay informed, and remember, history doesn't repeat itself, but it always rhymes.